Well, welcome to the Sean Trey Show. I've got a really awesome guest with me today. Now, would you like to tell people who you are and what you do?
My name is Mark Simon, and I'm known as the Godfather of Storyboarding in film and TV, but I'm also an author of quite a few books.
That's awesome. Now, when you sent me over your press pack and I saw the Godfather of Storyboarding, I was like, that's just awesome. To be called the Godfather of anything is a feat in and of itself. Now, how did you get into storyboarding? How did that journey begin?
It began when I was a kid. I actually, my first love was cartooning. I
That's
wanted
awesome.
to be a strip cartoonist, and I was for a while. I had a syndicated strip called Holly Weird, and I was a strip cartoonist for my university. I did cartoons for my high school. I did cartoons for the Houston Post when I was living in
That's
Houston.
awesome.
Even when I was still a teenager, I was selling cartoons to them. So, the cartoonists, like Charles Schultz
Yeah.
and Mike Peters, these guys were my childhood heroes. It wasn't football players or astronauts, it was cartoonists. So I always wanted to draw and I always wanted to tell stories. And then I saw Star Wars when I was 13. And when those ships came over,
Right.
I was spellbound. I was like, however they did this is my life. This is what I want to do. So I started studying film. And when I first moved out to LA, right after I graduated college, within a week of graduating, I was living in LA. And I thought I wanted to be an animator until I realized I was self-taught and didn't know how the industry worked. And I failed my first animation test.
Oh man.
So I fell back on my background as being a designer. My family had been building custom homes for a number of years. So I started designing and building sets in movies
That's
in
awesome.
Hollywood. And while I was doing that, I was also doing some storyboarding. And it wasn't until I was actually designing at Nickelodeon when Spielberg came into Orlando. I'd moved to Orlando at that point, and he brought in Sequest. I don't know if you remember that
Yeah,
old
of
show. It
course I
was,
remember Sequest. That was a great
yeah, it was
show.
in the early 90s, and it
Yeah.
was kind of like, I tell people, Star Trek underwater.
Yeah, it was a great show.
And 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 I was a really big fan of the first season. The second season, I moved to Orlando, and I wanted to work on it. And 15 minutes later, I landed the job as the story artist. It
That's
literally
awesome.
took me 15 minutes to get it, and it was so much fun that I became a full-time story artist. I launched my corporation during that show. I wrote my first storyboarding book during that show, and ever since, I mean, I've now worked on nearly 6,000 productions as a story artist.
That's unreal. That's a and so talk to me like I mean for people who don't know storyboard, what does a storyboard artist do?
Well, everyone's familiar with comic books,
Yeah.
and a storyboard is in the easiest way to say it, it's a comic book version of a script. Now,
Yeah.
we don't draw them as comic book pages. They're each drawing is the size and format of your film screen or TV screen, and it's just done a linear way where we illustrate every shot of a movie or TV show. Generally, stunts and effects and special camera moves. That's what we do. We don't do every shot. Um, so it's the director's vision. I'm illustrating the director's vision for the other 700 people on the crew. So
Yeah.
we're all working towards one central vision.
Hmm.
Because like if you read a book and I read a book, we're going to see different images in our head.
Yeah.
But if you've got 700 people working on trying to put this on celluloid or on digital now, you can't have 700 different visions. We all have to work towards the director's vision. And no matter how it's explained to you, words can only go so far.
Yep.
But when I get into the director's head and I can illustrate the director's vision, we all know exactly, all right, this is what we're going for. It answers questions, it brings up questions we didn't know we needed to ask, and it makes everything move smoothly. So if I'm doing my job right, I'm saving production time and money. It's not costing them to hire me. It saves them money.
That's awesome. And one of the things that's interesting too is like you made a good point. And I studied. I'm doing my master's degree in English with an emphasis in screenwriting. And one of the things that we were doing literary theory this semester, and you touch on postmodernism. And one of the ideas is like when a person. So if I say the word pen, okay, each person literally has a different image in their head of what a pen is. Maybe this pen is a zebra pen. And for me, it's always an iconic pen because when I grew up, my mom always had one of these at her office. She always had a green one. She had a green zebra pen, and it was for my entire college And in high school, my mom would always have that pin on her desk. So when I think about that, I think about that type of pin. But for someone else, maybe their family had a Mont Blanc, or some type of,
This is a digital pen, because
exactly,
I draw digitally. So
exactly.
there's not even ink in this, and this is what I use every day.
Exactly. And so when someone says, and for something as simple as a pen, and we all have a different image of it, versus the
Right.
idea of, one of the things that I remember, when you read a book, and then I remember I read the Harry Potter books before the movies came out,
Hmm.
and all of a sudden the movies came out, and I was like, that's not how I pictured it, but it's good, but it's different. And I could see how that could be a major challenge for, when you get your set designers, when you get your
Hmm.
costume department, when you get all these people that start having an absolutely different vision for a major production, that could be really complicated. So it does make
Well,
sense.
one of the other ways I describe it to people, it's like if you want to build a house, of course, because I had my background in home building. If you want to build a house and you say someone, "What's it going to cost you to build me a 3-bedroom house?" Well, how many questions are you going to have from that point?
Right?
So how many other rooms?
Yep.
What's the style design? Where is it going to be? Is it multi-level? Do you want a basement?
Yeah.
How decked out is the kitchen going to be? I mean, there's 1,000 in one questions that are going to go into it. So the same thing with storyboards. So the storyboards are kind of the blueprint,
Yeah.
because you can't build a house without blueprints.
Right?
That tells every crew what to do. Well, my storyboards do the same thing for production.
Well, that's awesome. And then I had a really interesting experience. I got to work early in my career. I got to work on a big Ron Howard movie, and one of the things that was the
Oh,
most
cool.
interesting is that there was a scene in Angels and Demons where the priest is hung up over the fire, and
Yep.
it was a day that was a tricky shoot because you got a lot of people there, a lot of practical effects. There was fire. There
Yeah.
was someone that was hanging there, and I remember walking over and they had the storyboard, just like put up for everyone in the crew to see. It was
Right.
right there, and they copied it shot for shot. And it was really interesting to see, to be able to walk over and look at that and go, wow, there's a lot of energy that is put into this to prep for this. And
Yeah. It's a visual. It's a visual shot list.
mm-hmm.
So, a lot of directors will break down, I want a close up of this, a wide angle of that, a master of this. But with a visual shot list, it answers more questions than just where's the camera going to be.
Yeah.
And the director or the assistant director will often go through, and as you get each shot done, they'll put a mark through the storyboard that's
Yep.
there on set. So everyone can just look at it and see, okay, we have 2 left. We have to get these or it's not going to edit and cut together. And I love going on set when they're shooting one of my sequences and I can see my storyboards there. And I have photos of directors with my storyboards. I've got
That's
photos of
awesome.
me on set with my storyboard, because I still get a kick out of it. I've been doing this now for well over 30 years and I'm still a major geek about it. I
Right.
still love being there. I love the energy of it.
Right.
Oh, yeah, I love everything about what I do. Yeah.
Uh, I think that people that don't get geeked out don't get it. You know what I mean? If you don't still love your job, you gotta be passionate about it because it's so interesting. It's so, it's like the idea of being able to take something and then take it into to what we see now. You look at
Hmm.
at I was recently watching Moon Knight, the new Marvel
All right.
show, and then all of a
Hmm.
sudden the credits started rolling, and I was just like, there is a lot of people. There are a lot of people that put their energy into making this happen.
Yeah.
Certainly everyone really respects the director, and Oscar Isaacs is amazing. Like, let's be real. But
Yep.
like, there's so many other people that take part in crafting this amazing thing, which is awesome.
Yeah, and going all the way back to, because we also have to give credit to the original writers and artists
Right?
of the comic books.
Right?
Yeah,
Exactly.
yeah. In fact, I just saw this morning someone had posted on Facebook one of the stills from the new yesterday, the new trailer for Thor: Love and Thunder
Which it
came out.
looks awesome.
It does look awesome, and there's this one shot where Thor and Gorg are up on top of a mountain, this hilltop, and there's this giant dead ice creature
Yeah.
behind them,
Yeah.
which down to the shape of the rocks is directly out of the comic book. Someone did a shot-by-shot comparison. They pulled the frame from the comic book, and that, I mean, literally, it's exact. Every bit of posing The only difference really is that Gorg was not not in the comic book. It was just Thor on the mountain.
Really?
Everything else, it's a perfect representation. And I've had to do that on a number of projects where we use the original comics as inspiration, like on The Walking Dead.
I was going to
We'll
ask
often
about that.
use the comic books as inspiration for certain iconic shots. And I've been lucky enough to illustrate a lot of the really iconic moments from the series. And I remember one of them, the director said, "Well, we're going to use this shot here of all of the Whisperer shooting the flaming
Oh,
arrows,
nice.
looking down the line." So okay, so I just scanned the image out of the comic book and put it into the storyboards. Why redraw something that's already there perfect?
Yeah.
So, and then there are times I have to do, additional things. We want that, but we have to have this because of what's already been developed in the show. And that to me is fun because I'm also a huge comic book fan. I had a collection of over 7,000 comics
That's awesome.
growing up. Yeah, so I mean, it's playing in the field. When I was drawing on Doom Patrol, I was a huge Doom Patrol fan. Or Black Lightning. I remember buying the first issue of Black Lightning. So playing in this realm, I'm such a kid again,
Right.
playing with all this.
That's awesome, man. It's really powerful because a couple things you touched on. One is there is such a rich mythos in these comic books.
Yeah.
Like, and I mean, we're talking just with Moon Knight. That's just one comic book, but there's so much in there with Thor.
Yeah.
How many different storylines can you draw from? And the mythos there. I tell people that. I think that if someone like Joseph Campbell was still around, he'd be geeking out on all of the comic books that were being written as well. It's like, it's the
Oh, I'm
hero's
sure,
journey is
absolutely.
everywhere.
And we're still studying the hero's journey.
Right.
I've read it a couple different times because as a story artist, I also write. I mean, thus the name story
Yeah.
with my title. It's not just artists. We're story artists. We help write, and so to enhance that, there's two main books that we read in film and TV. One is the hero's journey,
Hero's journey.
and the other one is Save the Cat.
Save the cat. Got a copy outside.
And it's when I discovered that, I thought, what a stupid title for a book. Why does everyone
Such
love
a
this?
great
And then
book.
I read it. It was like, it's one of the best titles I've ever heard. Because I do a lot of lecturing on the industry.
Yeah.
In fact, I was just talking about it yesterday. I was teaching a class in the Middle East. And I was talking about Save the Cat. You have to read Save the Cat. And here is why, as a story artist, why that's important.
That's awesome. And the thing is like sometimes Save the Cat to me was such an interesting book because when I read it, I was like, this is too simple. These concepts are too simple. It's like, that's not how it works. And then I was like, the monster in the I'm blanking on the one, but like Jaws and all them are like the monster in the room.
Right.
The monster that's
Mhm.
it's exactly there if you could look at it, and then you go through the hero's journey and you look at like, Star Wars fits it perfectly. Thor fits
Perfect,
it perfectly.
yeah.
There's
Yeah.
so many of them, and some of them that don't fit. I was looking at for this semester in my class, I'm actually looking at 1984, and I was interested because in 1984, why is that one so in a dystopia? In 1984, the book and the movie, the character fails in the hero's journey. He
Right.
doesn't achieve his goal, and so but you're still working off of that framework, which is to me it's just so interesting that we're circling
Yeah,
back.
and one
on
of the
these
things I
same
loved about
concepts.
Save the Cat is, I mean, it actually did teach me something that I hadn't thought of, but most of it just goes along with what we know, from having studied story. If you study story, most of it makes sense. But what it did is it opened my mind to other ways of looking
Yep.
at the stories.
Yes.
And that's what I thought was so brilliant. It made me think in a different way. And when you approach something differently, you can come up with alternative ideas that aren't so obvious that make it more interesting. And
Yeah.
that's what I really loved about it. In fact, I was giving a talk a week or so ago to a big group. In fact, I'm giving one to the Library of Congress tomorrow, and I'm also going to be talking about this.
That's rad.
And if you think about Save the Cat, and for those of you who are listening who haven't read the book, Save the Cat has to do with how do you know who the hero or anti-hero is? It's because they do something good, no matter how bad they are in life. If they do anything good, we know that they're the one we're going to root for, such as if they're on the way to rob a bank, but they stop to help a cat out of a tree, save the cat. All right,
Yep.
so that's a shortcut description to what this is about. And if you think about the first Incredibles movie, so Mr. Incredible
Yeah.
is on his way somewhere. We don't know really where he's going, but he's trying to stop these robberies. And on the way to stop one, he stops and saves a cat. And I thought, well, they obviously read the book Save the Cat, and this is their own ode to it,
Yeah.
because it was so on point. It
Yep.
was hysterical.
Yep. It's so beautiful because, you know, I think that we look at characters. Characters can become increasingly complex, and by their choices and by
Hmm.
what they do. But at the end of the day, you're right. It's simple. It really is simple. Like there's always this, this line in the sand for the greatest characters, and the what would you call it? The mystery and some of these stories, there is this enigma to this character. Okay, are they actually going to save the cat or are they not? But at the end,
Right,
their final action reveals who they are, and you go, okay.
right. It's funny. There's a Picasso exhibit that's traveling the United States right now, where it's this interactive. You actually walk through these giant projections of all
That's
the
awesome.
Picasso paintings, and yeah, it's wonderful. So I took some friends there, and and looking at Picasso's work, and of course, having been an art student, I studied Picasso in college. There's a big relevance to Picasso that I was talking to my friends about, which is when he was 15, his pencil illustrations were perfection. He
Yeah.
could draw the face, the human body, anything he looked at perfectly. So, well, you can't get any better than that. Thus, he went off and challenged himself in other things, and that brought him into his Blue Period and Cubist and all these other styles that he created because he needed that challenge.
Mm.
Well, with the simplicity of Save the Cat and the hero's journey. A hero's journey isn't necessarily simple. It's simple to look at, not simple to replicate.
Right.
But unless you can perfect the a way of telling a story that through the entire history of humanity has worked, unless you know that, you can't go beyond that to doing something more complicated. You
Yeah.
have to perfect the ability to tell a story to then play with it.
Yeah.
Know the rules before you can break the rules, because otherwise it just becomes a mess.
And and when you look at the hero's journey and you start tracing it back, I mean, it goes way back. You can get something like
Yeah,
the Epic of Gilgamesh. One of the oldest
absolutely.
stories out there, follows it perfectly. And
Yep.
from then on forward, we have throughout the history of literature, as long as you have these epic quests in a story, and an epic quest can be something as simple as finding one of my favorite recent stories and movies was The Secret Life of Walter Mitty, and
Oh, I love that.
I
Yeah.
love that movie. And again,
Yeah.
it's another hero's journey, but it wasn't some grand, thing. But if you go through the checklist of the things that have to happen on that
Hmm.
hero's journey, it checks them all off. They're all
Yeah.
there.
And to take that to the next step, you've got someone like Christopher Nolan who can tell a story brilliantly, but then challenge himself. And then when he did Memento,
Yeah.
telling the story backwards.
Yep.
You can't do that unless you know the right way to do it.
Yep.
The normal way, because it still has to make sense in the end, which it does, but you have to watch all the way through it before you realize whether it's making sense or
Yeah.
not.
Yep.
So, again, you've got to know the rules in order to break the rules. And that's where, unfortunately, a lot of young people who have every tool in the world that I wish I had when I was coming up don't realize. They just jump into it and they think, well, I'm just going to start being Spielberg. Spielberg didn't start as Spielberg. He was shooting films starting when he was 11 and 12 years old, and he learned from each one.
Yeah.
So, you've got to work your way through it.
Yeah.
And I don't say pay your dues, because I never paid dues. I
Yeah.
started very quickly in the industry. But, I didn't start as a director.
Well, I think
I
that
worked my way
what
up.
you could also say though too is like you have to, maybe you don't need to pay your dues, but you sure as heck need to do your research. and you sure as heck need to like really, really, really become a connoisseur of what you're looking to create. You know, if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. You've got to watch it, and you have to do it.
Yeah.
You only learn by experience. Kind of off the subject a little bit, but to give you the idea of how I think about this, I've seen people do film budgets, and
Yeah.
they'll say, well, this is going to cost. And I say, all right, you did this film budget. Have you ever budgeted a film that went into production? No, I just used another template. I said, then you have no idea if this will work. Unless you've ever tracked a budget you've created to then see how realistic it is, you have no idea whether it's an applicable budget or not.
That's a really good
So
point.
it's theory until you actually track it. Doing it doesn't mean anything. Just creating a template doesn't mean anything unless you've actually seen, does this work in reality? And then go back and compare. Oh, this is what I thought it would be. This is what it is. Now, the next time, your budget will be much more accurate because you know what to expect.
Yeah. Well, that's a really good point too. Like one of the things too that I'm a big fan and proponent of learning through doing,
Yeah.
and the idea of whether it be an apprenticeship or I didn't go to film school. I work as a director producer now, but I didn't go to film school. I got some jobs on films and I watched
hmm
and I was there, and it was interesting because you just start seeing
So
it.
that is school.
It is
You
exactly.
watch and you learn on set. I mean,
Exactly.
you're going to learn the best way that way. Yeah.
Right. And I think that I was interviewing my friend Sal, and Sal was the DOP on Angels and Demons, and he's done a Salvatore Totino, and he made a point. He's like, people come in, and you have to be willing to listen, to learn, to be open, because that's the most important thing. Like you can be anyone, but even the greatest people have the ability to learn and to still at any point in
Oh, yeah.
time be open to someone else's wisdom and feedback and all that, and I think it's so important.
It's funny you say that. A number of years ago, there was a couple of the Pixar story artists had a traveling tour.
Oh, nice.
And I was living in Orlando at the time, and literally the closest they were having it was up in New York City.
Oh man.
And it was a 2-day event where they were talking about storyboarding and storytelling. And so I bought my ticket and I flew up to New York, and I went. And before it opened on the first day, there was a big line that was in this old movie theater that they had booked out for 2 days. And so I'm standing there in this really cold morning, all bundled up like everyone else, waiting for them to open the doors. Everyone's talking, and someone turns and looks at me and goes, "Wait a minute, aren't you Mark Simon?" Because I'm pretty well known
Yeah.
in the industry because I do so much lecturing and all my books and everything on it. So someone looks at, "Wait, aren't you Mark Simon? Didn't you write the book on storyboarding?" I went, "Yeah, that's me." They, "What are you doing here? You wrote the book." I went, "Yeah, but if I'm going to learn from anyone, it's going to be from the guys at Pixar. I'm here
Right.
to get better." And they
Right.
were like, "Holy shit, really?" Like,
That's
yeah,
it.
I mean, I'm always trying to get better.
Right. There was I'm a big samurai movie fan, and
Oh, sure.
I
Yeah.
I, I mean I love all the old good stuff, from Japan, and
hmm
the old Kurosawa stuff. And I also
hmm
love the anime, and the idea is, and I'm a martial artist myself, and I always love the
I
old.
am too. Yeah.
I love the old. Awesome. What did you study?
Taekwondo. I'm a second-degree black belt and two-time national champion.
Well, you are awesome. Better than me. I'm not a national champion. I am a black belt in judo. I love it, but no champions. That's awesome, man.
Well, I
Um,
love judo. I studied judo in college, and that's a whole different form. In fact, my roommate is now a sixth dan in judo.
nice,
Well, my old college
nice.
roommate, who's still my best friend.
That's rad,
So
man.
yeah,
Well,
yeah,
so you'll like this part. The old
yeah.
samurai movies, you would get the guy who would study in his system, and he was that,
hmm
and then they would challenge another system. You know what I mean? And it was like
hmm
that whole thing. But yet, sometimes they would go and learn from the other master. And you would study this, and so this school would be this, and the idea being that there was such a wealth of knowledge, and like I started. I'm a black belt. I'm first dan only in judo. But when I went and got my daughter into Taekwondo, I put on a white belt, and you start over
Sure. Yeah.
because that's not my system, and
hmm
so we get there and we started training, and I love that beginner like space where you start over because, granted, I'm good at this, but I'm not good at this, and I want to learn from the
Yeah.
best, you know. And so you always can have that ability to learn.
Yeah, I mean, you've got a shortcut to hopefully learn, get into it quicker.
Right.
But yeah, we start over as white belts when we get into that stuff. Sure.
That's awesome. Now, here's a question that I've been wanting to really ask. Um,
Yeah.
so you work with the director, and then you also
Hmm.
have sometimes you have source material. You know, like for The Walking Dead,
Yeah.
you would have some source material, but some of the things you don't. How do you go about creating these images? Are you sitting there with the director and he's showing you some pictures, or are you doing some of your own ideas? Where do you go and how do you
You
get
know,
that?
it's that's a great question. It's actually everything, and it's going to be different in every project. Could be
Mm,
different every shot. On The Walking Dead, yeah, we reference the comic books at times, but that's going to be a couple individual shots
yeah,
of the hundreds that I'll be doing. Most of the time, it's the director of the shows know what they want. So there are times we'll act it out together.
yeah.
There are times we'll go on location together and step through it. Since COVID, that's been less the case because productions don't want story artists around. Anyone that can work virtually, they want to work virtually. So then the DP and the director take photos of locations,
Mm,
and in particular from the angles that they want to see things. And so they'll share that with me, and then we step through it. Some directors do their own bad thumbnails, which helps shortcut the idea. Sometimes they have written descriptions. Some directors have a very visual style. I mean, I try to study whichever director I'm going to work with.
that's a
If
good
I
point.
have not worked with them before, I'll look at their recent stuff. So when we start working, I know how they like to move the camera, how they like to balance the frame. I'll know some of the key elements. So when I start sketching, it's closer to what they're likely going to want. And I'll sketch in real time, just like you and I are on a Zoom right now. I'll do that when I'm sharing my digital screen.
Um,
So as I'm sketching, they'll say, well, move that character more over, or let's bring someone in the foreground on this side, or I saw it from the other screen direction. So I'm doing real-time adjustments in sketching and getting approvals instantly.
that's
So I'm
awesome.
able to move quicker and get the director's vision much faster than most other story artists do, just because of the process that I work at. I enjoy it. I like that collaboration back and forth. And it also allows me, when I have an idea of something that'll enhance the shot, I'll sketch it in. So what do you think? And then we'll go back and forth and move on from there. So, my goal is always to get the director's vision and plus it whenever possible.
That's awesome.
And so I love both aspects of it.
That's really awesome. And you know, and I'm sure that each different director has a different workflow, has a different approach to how they can
Yep.
visualize. But
And it's up to me to work in what works best for them.
mm,
So I'll pull every trick out until one works. And then I work that way with them.
now you're of course obviously working with the director, but how much is the DOP an influence in that, in what you're sketching out too?
It depends on the director. Some directors have a very specific vision, and the DP doesn't need to be there for it, or DP might be doing second unit work on another episode, might not be available. For those of you who don't know, on hour-long shows in particular, there's two sets of crews. There's a
Hmm.
prep crew and a shooting crew. And the prep crew is the director, the first AD, and director of photography. And so they do every other episode. So while one DP is shooting, another is prepping. But sometimes the one that's prepping has to be doing other pickup shots from a previous episode,
Mm,
or to help out when there's too much going on. I like it when a DP is involved, and in particular if it's a kind of a new director, they're almost always there,
hmm.
and I'll work a lot with the DP. In fact, there's a movie that's coming out. There's a new version of Father of the Bride. There's
Okay.
been a couple. There was the Steve Martin
Yeah, yeah,
versions
yeah.
years and years ago, and there's a new one coming out now that I worked on that's Hispanic,
Okay.
and Gloria Estefan plays the mother. A big actor. I'm blanking on the guy's name who plays the main actor in it, but he's fantastic. Well, there's a few really long singles, which is a lot happening in one shot where the camera follows characters around. And so I storyboarded those, and the DP was heavily involved because he had the vision on how it would work out.
Yeah.
So, you know, the three of us, the director, the DP, and I would sit down and I worked out all those incredibly long shots, and then as a good story artist, we always try to not just the illustration, but also put notes to the side. So if I knew they were going to be using a certain kind of technique or a certain lens on something, I make sure I put those notes in, because if it's important enough for them to tell me, it's important enough for the rest of the crew to know. So, I try to put in literally everything I
That's
can,
awesome.
where it becomes, like I said before, the blueprint for production. So I try to answer more questions than people even know are going to come up.
And see, that's one of the things too that I've always been a huge fan of storyboarding, just because of for the simple principle of my friend Trey is military, and he was telling me that he worked in support of the Army Rangers, and so they would go out there and they would be on the ground, and he said he remember when a couple times when the SEAL team came in, and the SEALs were sitting there and they were going to go out on a mission, and they taped out on the ground the shape of the house. And
Right.
he says they taped out the shape of the house that they were going to be going into. They knew the shape of it. And then they were just walking through this tape thing on the tarmac. And he says they did it for, 6, 8 hours, walking through, going through on just with tape on the ground. And the idea being, if you can prepare, and you can prepare for everything, that when you get to the day, there will be problems. There will be issues that arise,
Sure.
but if you've prepared enough for them, you can have already prepared for everything and mitigate any damage or problems. And I feel like storyboarding is such a huge part of that in a film production or TV production, because you really are prepping and putting everything down on paper so that you know what's supposed to be coming.
It's funny. That's almost exactly how I describe the value of pre-production to a lot of people. I mean, that was brilliantly put. Because I always tell people that, the more prepared you are, the easier it is to deal with a few changes
Yep.
or mess ups that happen. But if you're chasing your tail from minute one,
Yeah.
any extra little thing could be the straw that breaks a camel's back.
Yep.
So the more prepared we are, the easier it is to deal with something that comes up. And again, so the more we prepare, the more questions we can answer, then people are ready for it.
Yeah, and hopefully everyone can go home peaceful and relaxed at the end of the day, which is not likely on a film set. But
No, it's not.
the more
Yeah.
peace that you can give people, the more likely that the production's going to finish on budget and on time. And I think those are,
Yeah.
like you said, you save the production money, and that to me actually makes a lot of sense. My wife, like I said, is a famous singer here in Vietnam, and I remember once we've been on. She's been on a ton of different productions that I've gone with her on, and I will stand by this. The productions that flow the best are the ones that they've really done great pre-production and have really rock solid storyboarding almost every time, because they know exactly what they're looking for. Oh, this is our shot here. And then they reproduce it, and it turns out
Yep.
well. But the people who don't have that together, you feel like you're on a roller coaster, and you don't know where the roller coaster is going on the next, in the next second. It's wild.
Well, and one of the other things that I do, because the software I use is called Storyboard Pro, and it's a great software. I've actually been working with the company for years and years to enhance it, and they had hired me to come in and work with them at one point to help make it work better for live action productions.
That's awesome.
And so while I'm storyboarding, in addition to just giving them the storyboards, I'm creating an animatic, which is a video storyboard. So that I put in motion and sound and everything in real time as I'm working. So the director can watch the storyboards play out like the finished video.
That's awesome.
What that allows is, it's one thing to look at still images and go, yeah, okay, I can see where that'll work. But to watch the video,
Yeah.
if the timing is there, do you need an extra shot? Is it really as smooth as it needs to be, and allows us to really hone in and make it even better.
Yeah.
So it allows me to be a better story artist. It allows the director to get a better feel for what the finished piece is going to be like. And it's a huge benefit to be able to see things in motion
Yeah.
that way. In fact, it's funny. So many directors of photography have the same joke with me, and they all think they're the only one who comes up with it, which cracks me up. They say, "Well, we got that. We don't even need to shoot it now." And I'm like, "Perfect. If you are saying that, the director of photography is saying that I've captured your vision that well, I have done my job. I'm thrilled with that." Yeah.
And I think that that's awesome because right there, it's yeah, you I've talked to a bunch of people that are involved in the world building aspect. Set designers, costume
Hmm.
designers, and all these in DOP as well. Creating the vision with the light. And that the idea is there was great example. There was a this one video on not video, it was a photo on Instagram, and it showed some famous movies without some of the lighting done. And so it was like
All
this is
right.
like and it was like and it just it didn't have the vibe, and
Hmm.
that you have to create this vision, and I mean, remove special effects from a shot, and you get actors just waving their arms around or stuff,
Right.
and so when you have to create these things, people need a vision, and
Yeah.
whether it's the vision for a company, people need to be able to see what they're aspiring towards, and so it's something to me that I what was it, you go back to a picture's worth 1,000 words, in a
Hmm.
video is worth a million pictures or whatever, it's like
Yeah.
you have this thing that how do you create a vision, and it's not just in movies but in life, when we can that I love the whole whether you believe in that or not, like I loved the whole movement in the early 2000s where everyone was doing their manifestation boards, and I was like,
Oh yeah.
whether you think it's hokey or not, I was always cracking up about it, but I was like, you know what, I love that people can essentially put together a picture. It reminded me of storyboarding because I was like, they're kind of essentially putting out, this is what I want to create, and then you find steps to do it, because in life we all have to find ways to make things happen, and if you can break things into little steps. I interviewed this guy named Miles Dasher, and he was really awesome. He's a Red Bull skydiver, and
Okay.
he was talking about, he says to his kids, did you win today? Did you in some way, shape, or form win today? What was it that you brought
Hmm.
home that was winning? So it just reminds me of like, and can you make your goal into these small different compartments? And like you said, it's so great when you see the AD and they cross off a shot, and you're just like,
Yeah.
being crew, being an actor on set, when you see that shot crossed off, you're just like, yes,
It's goal setting.
it's goal setting.
It's and I love working off lists because it's minor little goals, and you feel that little sense of accomplishment with every little thing you can tick off. And yeah, my dad taught me that when I was a kid working construction with him. We had this long list, and boy, by the time I got down to the end, you feel good about the day.
Yes, you do. And
Yeah.
and if you don't have that list, that house is not going to build itself. And
Right.
and people just, we in life, so many people assume that things are just going to assemble themselves, and you don't realize that until you start working at it, it's not how it works. We have to put the things in place. Granted, you know hopefully you either A, are so knowledgeable you know what steps you need to do, or B, someone's giving you the directions, but you still got to
Hmm.
pace yourself and get through it.
Yeah, and you're not the only one doing it.
Exactly.
Everyone has to be working together. And to that point, when production is budgeting and scheduling, they're making a lot of assumptions and a lot of guesses, all based on the written word.
Yeah.
But the visuals might not match the written word. So, for instance, a long time ago, boy, it was probably back in the 90s, I was working on a movie based on the 60s TV series called McHale's Navy.
I know Mikhail's name.
And Tom Arnold
Yeah, yeah.
played McHale in it. And there's this one sequence where it was only an eighth of a page on the script, which is like one short paragraph,
Yeah.
right? It's 3 lines of text of Vladikov blows up Mikhail's hut, and Mikhail chases Vlad in the PT Cruiser. Then Vlad blows up the Mikhail's boat. That was it. And
Short text.
and so the direct yeah. So the director and I sat down, boarded it out. It took about a week and a half to storyboard that one little paragraph, and it turned into 4 days of shooting
Yeah.
with multiple boats and explosions and camera shots in Acapulco. And the reason I bring this up is there's no way production would have read that one paragraph and budgeted for all the
40.
stuntmen, all the
Yeah.
practical effects, all the post visual effects, and all those days in order to get all the boats chasing and shooting and things blowing up everywhere. And in this one particular area with all these rocks that come up out of the Gulf, and so once they saw the storyboards, they were then able to properly schedule and then budget, because you can't budget without a schedule. There's always a process.
Yeah.
They were able to schedule and budget exactly what it would take. So when they got to that location, they could finish everything because they had planned on the right amount of time.
Yeah.
Because it's very expensive to go back to
Right.
something.
Yeah.
You want to get it done the first time you go there.
That's so interesting.
So, there's so much to, as you were talking about, properly planning something.
Yeah.
But a lot of people don't realize how many other crews can't even finish their planning until they get the visual of the director's vision.
That's really interesting. Well, here's my next question for you. If you could go back in time and give some advice to your younger self, what advice would you give yourself?
It took a while to pull my ego out of storyboarding. A lot of
Interesting.
storyboard artists, and I was absolutely guilty of this, was we fight for our vision,
Hmm.
but we're not the director.
Yeah.
You know, I fight for the director's vision. Now, if I see something that's wrong or could be better, sure, I'll push for it, but only to a point, because I'm not the one making the final decision. I'm always trying to plus it. I've had to fire story artists because they fight the director, and they'll say, "But my idea is better. You need to do it this way." It's like, yeah, no, that's not the way this world works.
Yeah.
The director has the final say. My ego got in my way a number of times, so I probably try to put myself in check. But my younger self probably just would have rolled his eyes. So I don't know if that would have worked.
Right. I can respect that.
I might have started into storyboarding earlier. I started, like I said, as an art director for a number of years. But I don't know if I would have been ready for storyboarding at the
Right.
time. Having been an art director and production designer gave me insight into other areas of production that I now use when I'm storyboarding. And look, and I love doing it too.
Yeah.
So, my career took off pretty damn fast when I got out there, out to Hollywood. So I don't know really what I would change,
Yeah.
because it's been a hell of a ride.
That's awesome. Well, how about this one? What if you had Aladdin's lamp? What would you wish for?
A budget to there's two movies of mine that I want to make,
Nice.
and I got a deal twice on one of them, but the studio fell apart
Hmm.
and went out of business before we could shoot it. And the other is actually based on my latest novel, Attacked. I really want to shoot them. So,
That's awesome.
to get the budget and distribution, which doesn't mean it won't happen, but it's difficult for anybody.
Yeah.
So that's probably my ultimate goal at the moment, is to get these things produced.
That's awesome. Well, I hope it happens, man. Now, if here's a fun one. Here's a fun. You are
Okay.
into comic books and sci-fi and such.
Mhm.
If you could live in any world, any whether it be Star Wars universe, Marvel, what realm would you like to inhabit?
Probably whatever I was watching most recently, but I can tell you what has hit me the most is Avatar. Um, I remember because Disney World opened up at Animal Kingdom. They opened up in Avatar Land,
Yeah.
and when I went there and I just sat there and you're immersed in it. There's the floating rocks, up above you, literally rocks floating in the sky. I mean, it's phenomenal what they put together. And then some of the rides where you've got all these incredible animatronics and 3D images moving around you, or flying on one of those things, and you get the scents and everything. that was just absolutely amazing, and I felt like I was there, and it was emotional
That's awesome.
feeling that. So, and I'm not the only one. There's actually a term, I don't remember what it is, but there's a term of how people felt depressed when their life didn't live up to Avatar.
Really?
Yeah, it's a big thing. So, and not that I want to live as a giant blue person on another planet and wear a
No.
loincloth, but there's something about it was magical the way the story was told,
Yeah.
and I'm looking forward to seeing the next one to
Tell
see
me
if it
about
hits
it.
me the same way.
Right?
So,
Well,
yeah.
aren't there two of them that they already?
Well, there's four more. He's shot the next two, and he's in the process of shooting 4 and 5 right now.
That's awesome.
So, yeah, this November, I believe, number 2 comes out.
I'm excited for that.
Yeah, I am too.
That's awesome, man. Well, brother, I want to say I really appreciate your time. This has been an awesome deep dive, and I feel very schooled, and I'm gonna have to go back and look back at some of the concepts and reread, definitely reread Save the Cat.
Actually, got me thinking about I should probably reread it myself. So, yeah, no, I appreciate it. This has been really fun. This was one of the more relaxed and just kind of free flowing interviews I've done in a long time. I really
So
appreciate
yeah,
it.
whenever people ask me like, what are we gonna be talking about, I generally just I like to follow the rabbit hole, see where it goes, and see what comes up, because I feel like those are some of the
It's a good
best.
conversation, man. It's fun.
Yeah, right. I appreciate it, brother.